Oh, political analyst Martin Summers is joining us over the phone to discuss this further. Martin, thank you very much for joining us. We heard today the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov say that they will play a pivotal role in trying to bring about an immediate ceasefire in the east of Ukraine in today's Berlin peace talks. Just how much of a pivotal role do you think Russia can play here?
Well, Russia has attempted to play a mediating role from the very beginning of the crisis, and one would hope that after the shambles of last year, that everybody concerned would have recognised the impossibility of a military victory here. But I'm afraid there are bigger forces at work. Attempts to destabilise the Russian state completely means that elements within the Western establishment want to see conflict here, I'm afraid. It seems silly, but I'm afraid that seems to be the picture that I'm picking up.
So are you trying to say that the conflict in Ukraine is some sort of a tool to affect and put down Russia then?
Well, yes, I think there are elements within. I mean, if you saw the congressional elections in the US brought hardliners to the fore, like Senator John McCain, and then they're really not happy with any kind of settlement of the dispute. One would have thought that European leaders would have been much more eager to settle the dispute, and of course we saw Francois Hollande visit Paris not long before the recent events that visit Moscow not long before the recent events in Paris. And I think there are elements within the European Union leadership which definitely do want a settlement of the dispute. But you've got to remember that the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, which is being pushed by the US, is rather controversial in Europe. But of course, if there is a conflict with the Russians, then the Americans have become absolutely necessary to the Europeans as a counterweight to so-called Russian pressure. So I'm afraid that the dispute in the Ukraine, which is intractable enough given the circumstances, is made worse by the fact that it's become a cockpit for geopolitical tensions of a global nature.
And I know you're saying that this conflict in the east of Ukraine somehow is being used by certain factors to try and damage Russia, but given that we've seen peace talks time and time again in different places and with different foreign ministers taking part in different countries and leaders, what do you think the main thorn is here? Is it just Russia, or are there other factors and other stuff that are affecting this peace process from going ahead? Because surely the factors in Ukraine, be it the pro-Russian rebels or the Kiev forces, they're all suffering, if we can say so,
well, they are,
the
although of
crisis.
course the main military conflict is taking place in the East Ukraine rather than in the West Ukraine. But the Ukrainian economy is in a desperate position and really requires both European and Russian help if the living standards of the population aren't to fall even further. And of course the conflict itself does not help that. But I'm afraid that the whole conflict from the very beginning has been escalated by radical elements in Kiev and also their backers in Western capitals, particularly the US. And I think the Russians have been bending over backwards, frankly, to try and reach some kind of accommodation, and that is still their policy. If they wanted to, the Russian military could intervene in the Ukraine very decisively, but they've ruled that out from the very beginning, and yes. I don't expect that they're going to do that now.
And you brought up an interesting point about the Ukrainian economy, because of course that is suffering immensely because of the ongoing crisis.
Yeah.
Will the Europeans, in your opinion, be able to bail out or support the Ukrainian economy?
Well, no, they won't, and I think this is the big tragedy of the whole situation.
Yes.
Is that the Ukrainians have, or the West Ukrainians, if you like, have jumped towards the European Union and towards NATO in the hopes of improving their living standards. But the conflict that's been created has actually driven their living standards down. And the fact is that the European Union can barely afford to bail out Greece, never mind a big country like the Ukraine. So the Ukrainians are deluding themselves if they think there's A, any quick entry into the European Union, or that B, the European Union has got any spare funds with which to bail them out, because they haven't.
Yes, Martin Summers, a political analyst, much appreciated. Thank you very much for joining us over the phone from London.